The importance of mining to the Australian economy should not be underestimated.
It's the state that provides the bulk of Australia's exports, the bulk of Australia's growing national income, and people in their thousands are flocking to Western Australia.
The world's response to climate change is simultaneously reshaping the global economy, global politics, and the global energy system.
A partly cloudy day, sunshine and 31 in Adelaide. It's 15 now, 35 the top in Perth with cloud clearing, currently 20.
The clean energy transition will have big implications for Western Australia, where 94% of the state's $187 billion worth of exports come from the carbon-intensive resources sector.
There's no doubt at all that mining and the mining industry in general is incredibly important to Western Australia.
This is the Kwinana Nickel Refinery south of Perth, owned by BHP, the world's largest mining company.
I've worked here for 10 years, and before that I worked in the oil and gas industry, and before that I was a climate scientist. I get asked a lot, you know, how can you live with yourself? How can you sleep at night? Like, people have asked me that. And I think I could be on the outside and I could throw stones, or I can be inside an organisation and try and change it from within.
As the Vice President of Climate Change and Sustainability, it's Fiona Wild's job to rein in the company's carbon emissions.
I think it's really important for people to hold companies to account. So what I want to do, I want to make sure that when BHP sets a target, we have a really good idea about how we're going to get there. Maybe 20 years ago, industry was working in an environment where policymakers were setting the rules and setting the pace of action on climate change. That's not the case anymore.
In 2019, BHP pledged to go net zero by 2050. While the mining giant is offloading its mines that produce coal for power stations, it's holding on to its high-quality coal mines critical for steel making.
Coal does not have a long-term place in our portfolio. We've let the market know that we're looking for options to exit the energy coal business. You need to have iron ore and metallurgical coal currently to produce the steel that's required to build the wind turbines and the other infrastructure that actually enables emissions to be reduced.
BHP believes reducing its emissions is vital for the company's long-term future.
I can't see a downside for BHP of action on climate change. BHP actually does best in a world that rapidly decarbonises. So for us, action on climate change isn't a trade-off with economic value. Action on climate change is completely aligned with how we build the most value for BHP.
They have a very difficult track record when it comes to carbon emissions. Now, I think the pressure is really on them to change. It's been building since the Paris Agreement, but now it's really serious.
Australia accounts for just 0.3% of the world's population, but produces nearly 1.3% of global emissions. While 50% of our big miners, refiners and metal manufacturers have plans to reduce emissions, less than half of those companies have targets to achieve net zero in their operations by 2050 or sooner. A controversial issue is whether Australian companies should be partly responsible for the so-called Scope 3 emissions created offshore by their customers.
I think it's somewhere north of 5% if you count our exports. So it massively changes Australia's emissions profile if you count our exports.
Increasingly what people are saying is that Scope 3 emissions has to be everyone's problem. The speed of that transition could really threaten Australia's economic future unless we get on board with it and understand it.
Whether or not you believe it's big business or government that's best placed to tackle climate change, the reality is it's business that's moving first and fast towards a carbon net zero future.
The green economy transition is the largest economic opportunity Australia has ever had. It is our largest single job creator. Australia should 10, 20, 30 years from now be a resource-driven economy. It's just we'll have different types of resources.
A major backer of renewables is co-founder of software giant Atlassian, Mike Cannon-Brookes, with more than $1 billion invested in renewable energy, transport and sustainable agriculture.
We need to have a legislated 2050 net zero target with interim milestones, with real legislative teeth that gives certainty to to industry, to business on how to invest to get there. But ultimately, we need to get there, and we can't do it all in 2045. This is the sort of thing that, you know, we can't eat cakes for the next 25 years and then suddenly go and get fit at the end of it.
He sees the most carbon-intensive industries being squeezed out by market forces.
Whether or not people are buying coal, whether or not people are buying gas, isn't going to be up to us, right? Our naivety to think that we control those markets is baffling to me. They're going to move away from that whether we like it or not. Investors are realising, both public company investors but also banks, insurance companies, that that industry is not going to be around in 20 years' time.
While the future of coal is in doubt, the fossil fuel remains the largest source of energy in Australia's national electricity market. But according to the energy market operator, coal-fired generation is expected to fall, with 9 of the remaining 16 coal-fired stations in the national electricity market expected to close before 2040. The value of Australia's energy coal exports is also forecast to fall from $21 billion last financial year to $15 billion this year.
What really matters in terms of coal is what happens if your customer has to cut their emissions substantially. That is going to affect you.
This goes to make people's dreams, their homes, their cars.
Struggle Street, Wealth Street, it doesn't matter.
Good to see you, mate.
Good to see you, Tony.
You made your fortune mining iron ore, and Fortescue emits 2 million tonnes of greenhouse gas each year. What's been the cost in the making of your fortune in terms of contributing to climate change?
Yeah, I haven't calculated that. It crazily, none of those things got taken into account apart from the last couple of years. But I think it's not a cost which society should shoulder. I think there is a cost if you're producing something which has an extra emissions, and you do one of two things. You either get those emissions down or you pay for that cost.
Fortescue Metals Group Chairman Andrew Twiggy Forrest wants to make his company carbon neutral in 9 years' time. But he doesn't think Fortescue should also be partly responsible for his customers' emissions. Shouldn't your carbon footprint also include the emissions generated when your iron ore is processed overseas?
No, I think that is a bridge too far. What I need to do is not a Pyrrhic victory or a virtue signalling, like saying I'm going to try and stop my customers from using coal. I can't stop them using coal. What I'm now working on is a replacement for coal, and that's green hydrogen.
To make steel in a way that doesn't damage the planet. It's, you know, the holy grail in a sense for the Australian iron ore industry.
We need to grasp that opportunity. We need to say, with a little bit of vision, a little bit of drive and a little bit of risk, could we create a massive new industry which creates the steel which the world needs, which is zero carbon steel? That's our future. I do speak to our political leaders, and they are moving. Government won't front-run industry. Fortescue's decided to step up and take that first mover risk. But I believe it's going to work, and we'll keep on persevering until it does work.
The reason we're in this climate problem is the markets failed because they did not recognise the true cost of using fossil fuels.
The former chair of the Australian Coal Association, Ian Dunlop, says business alone can't solve climate change with the urgency required.
Markets are very helpful, but they have to have regulation around them which reflects the true values of society. In other words, you don't let sewage flow down the street. You know, you price that and you stop people doing it. You regulate against it. Now, we haven't done that with carbon. We should have done.
The economic shift away from carbon-intensive industries is happening largely because the climate science tells us the world needs to act decisively this decade to avoid the worst climate impacts.
The best scientific evidence, in fact, shows that once we stop burning fossil fuels, once we stop adding carbon pollution to the atmosphere, the warming of the planet stabilizes fairly quickly, within a few years. And so there's an immediate and direct impact of our efforts to reduce carbon emissions.
We know a lot about the science of climate change. We know what's going to happen. We know what effects are going to be at a large level. The cost of that, the impact to Australia, is in the trillions of dollars. We are going to pay those costs. We have continued to be a regressive force in international climate politics, largely because we're the third largest exporter of fossil fuels in the world.
The Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction, Angus Taylor, told 730 Australia's track record is one of reducing emissions faster than our developed country peers. That Australia's emissions fell faster than those of Canada, New Zealand, Japan, Korea and the United States between 2005 and 2018.
Don't let it be said by those who want to talk Australia down and what we're doing on emissions that we're not carrying our load. We are, and we're leading the way. We're not going to meet our climate change targets through punishing taxes. I'm not going to tax our industries off the planet.
The fossil fuel industry is perhaps our most dangerous industry in the world right now because it'll be economics which force them to change. But they won't go down without a serious fight.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.